Before history was written, before cities rose, before anyone carved symbols into stone, humanity almost disappeared. Not because of war, not because of disease, not because a mountain exploded or an asteroid fell from the sky. It began with something so ordinary that almost no one noticed. One morning, a child followed the familiar path to the river. Bare feet pressed into cool earth still damp from the night's dew. The child knew every bend in the trail, where the smooth stones lay beneath the water, where fish gathered in the shallows, where birds always filled the trees just before sunrise. It was a journey repeated so many times that it required no thought. Until today, the river was still there, but something had changed. Water that once rushed around the rocks now slipped quietly between them. Mud reached farther onto the banks than anyone could remember. The morning chorus of birds had fallen strangely silent. The child waited. Nothing happened. Far upstream, an elder watched the same river without speaking. She had never heard the words climate change. She didn't measure rainfall or study weather patterns. But she had lived through enough seasons to recognize when the land began speaking differently. Over the following weeks, the signs multiplied. Fruit ripened later than usual. Grass turned brown too early. The herd that crossed the valley every year never arrived. Each change seemed too small to fear. Together, they told a terrifying story. Home was slowly becoming somewhere else. Nearly 1 million years later, scientists would discover that our ancestors lived through one of the most unstable climatic periods in human evolution. Repeated swings between wetter and drier conditions transformed rivers, forests, and grasslands across Africa, forcing people to adapt or disappear. But no one living through those days could see the bigger picture. They only saw today, and today looked slightly worse than yesterday. One evening, the elder knelt beside the river and scooped a handful of damp earth into her palm. Slowly, she let it slip through her fingers. Around her, conversations faded. No one asked what she was thinking. No one needed to. At sunrise, the camp began walking. They left behind the only home most of the children had ever known. No one knew where the next river waited, or whether it waited at all. They couldn't know that this journey would become part of one of the greatest survival stories our species has ever lived. But here's the mystery. If almost everything these people touched has vanished, how do we know any of this happened? Time is remarkably good at erasing ordinary lives. The campfires grew cold. Footprints disappeared beneath the wind. Wood returned to the earth. Even the paths they walked faded beneath fresh grass. Thousands of years later, another family could cross the same valley without ever knowing someone had once called it home. For generations, scientists searched for answers beneath the ground. Stone tools, ancient campsites, fragments of bone. Each discovery revealed another small piece of humanity's forgotten past. But when they looked deeper into this chapter of history, something strange happened. The evidence almost vanished. The fossil record became unusually quiet. It was as though someone had torn one of the most important chapters from the story of our species. Then researchers realized they had been searching in the wrong place. The missing witness wasn't buried beneath the earth. It was walking through supermarkets, waiting at traffic lights, looking back from every mirror. Inside nearly every cell of your body is a molecule that has traveled through an unbroken chain of parents and children for hundreds of thousands of years. DNA. Most people think of DNA as a biological instruction manual. It is, but it's something else as well. It is history written without words. Every generation copies it. Every generation leaves behind tiny changes called mutations. Most mean nothing. Some disappear forever. A few continue traveling through time. Imagine copying the same map by hand for thousands of generations. Most copies remain almost identical. Occasionally, someone forgets a line, redraws a river, or marks a new path. Compare enough maps, and those tiny differences begin revealing how every copy is connected. Geneticists do something remarkably similar. Instead of studying ink, they study mutations. Instead of reconstructing maps, they reconstruct families stretching back nearly 1 million years. And when enough human genomes were compared, an extraordinary pattern emerged. People from different continents, different cultures, different languages, were genetically far more alike than anyone expected. At first, scientists searched for ordinary explanations. Perhaps humans simply hadn't existed long enough. Perhaps populations mixed more frequently than researchers believed. But as more DNA was analyzed, the same pattern kept returning. Our family tree narrowed dramatically. Some recent studies suggest that around 900,000 years ago, humanity's effective breeding population may have fallen to roughly 1,000 individuals, although the exact numbers remain actively debated. The details may change, the larger story has not. Our ancestors passed through an evolutionary bottleneck so severe that our entire future balanced on the survival of remarkably few people. That raises an even bigger question. How did they survive when extinction seemed almost inevitable? Imagine another evening. The fire burns low. Children sit quietly, their stomachs empty. Two hunters disappear beyond the hills before sunrise. Hours pass. The elder watches vultures circling in the distance. By afternoon, the hunters return. Empty-handed, no one asks whether they found food. Their faces answer the question before words can. That night's meal is little more than roasted roots and bitter seeds. Tomorrow has become uncertain once again. Then, just before sunset, figures appear on the horizon. Another group. For a moment, no one moves. Strangers could mean danger or salvation. One of the newcomers steps forward carrying fresh meat. After a long silence, it is placed beside the fire. The children eat first. No celebration, no speeches, just another day survived. Scenes like this leave almost no archaeological evidence. Yet, they may have changed the future of humanity. For generations, people imagined evolution as a contest where only the strongest survived. But human survival tells a different story. In unpredictable environments, today's successful hunter might fail tomorrow. A family unwilling to share could become the family that starved next season. Cooperation didn't remove risk. It spread it across the group. And in a world filled with uncertainty, that may have made all the difference. The next morning, the child wandered toward a patch of bright red berries. Before tiny fingers reached them, the elder gently took the child's wrist and pointed toward another plant nearby. No lecture, no explanation, just a quiet lesson. Years later, the child would repeat that same gesture with another generation. Knowledge had survived another lifetime. Scientists call this culture. At its simplest, culture is information passed from one generation to the next through learning instead of genes. Which routes are safe? Which rivers last through the dry season? Which valleys flood without warning? One person's experience became everyone else's advantage. Our ancestors weren't simply evolving stronger bodies, they were evolving stronger communities. Over time, biology and culture began shaping each other in a remarkable partnership. Better learners created better culture. Better culture improved survival. Improved survival favored brains that could learn even faster. This process, known as gene-culture coevolution, may be the greatest advantage our species ever developed. Not sharper teeth, not greater strength, the ability to inherit knowledge from people who were no longer alive. That changed everything. Generation after generation, small bands became larger communities. They followed rivers into unfamiliar lands, crossed vast grasslands, adapted to forests, deserts, mountains, and frozen coastlines. The fragile thread that had nearly snapped slowly spread across continents. One day, those descendants would build villages, then cities. They would cross oceans, walk on the moon, decode the very DNA that preserved the story of their survival. The people who carried humanity through that impossible chapter never knew they were changing the future. They weren't trying to become legends. They were simply trying to reach tomorrow. Think back to the river, where this story began. The silent birds, the cracked earth, the elder letting damp soil fall through her fingers. At the time, it felt like an ending. In reality, it was the beginning of a journey that would eventually reach every inhabited continent, every language, every civilization, and every person alive today. History often celebrates kings, conquerors, and inventors. Evolution remembers something else: a mother who found water, a hunter who shared food, an elder who passed on a lesson, a child who survived another season. They left behind no monuments, no written records, not even their names. Their greatest legacy wasn't something they built. It was someone. Us.